All righty. All right, students, welcome. All right, let me let in Max. Uh, Boom. So we have a special guest lecturer today, Chris Kocek. Chris was someone thanks to my friend Douglas Burdett, when he had his wonderful podcast, the Marketing Book Podcast, I heard this interview. I bought the book. Any insights yet? Because I said, this is vital stuff that my students need to understand. The subtitle of that is How Insights Connect Dots, Create Categories, and Transform Businesses. And this skill, if you can learn this skill as you depart for your marketing careers, you're going to be so far ahead of other folks that are doing the same thing you're doing. Chris is a author, a speaker. His newsletter is must read. I get a lot of newsletters. His is one of the few that I open the minute it comes in and read it from top to bottom. And hopefully he'll tell you how you too can subscribe at the end of this. He has a branding firm that he founded, and he works with companies around branding. So he's a real life brand manager. And so he'll share some insights around that as well. He's also a podcast host. His Chris Smith is the place to start. This is a guy that's made a huge thing about strategy on LinkedIn. Graduated from the University of Texas, lives in Austin, home of the Blues down in Texas, has a lot to say, and I'm going to shut my big fat mouth and turn it on over to Chris Kocek. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. I know it's a little bit earlier in the morning where you guys are, I think, right? Pretty early.
9:30, 9:30.
9:30. That's still pretty early, especially when you're in college. But I wanted to start off by just thanking everybody, and also seeing show of hands, how many people are juniors and seniors? Do I have a lot of juniors and seniors? All right. So this might be relevant to you. Is anybody interested in knowing how to get a job before you graduate? Or do you feel like you've got a lock on it? All right. One of the things we're going to be doing in this call is I'm going to ask you guys to answer some things, or share your thoughts in the chat. Okay. So don't be afraid to use the chat. And sometimes I might just ask someone. I might say Darby or Gwen or David or Thomas. Could you go ahead and share a thought there? All right. So I might call on you directly. And I'd love for you guys to be engaged and participate. All right.
Come on, guys, let's do it. Let's do it.
So how to get a job in advertising before you graduate. All right. So the first thing is you got to show your work. So what do I mean by show your work? There are things that you're passionate about, that you care about, that you have hobbies or interests and things like that intersect with what you're learning in advertising, right? So show of hands, how many people have some sort of blog or are consistently sharing their work, their thoughts, their passions on LinkedIn, on a blog, on Medium, things like that? Quick show of hands. Anybody? All right. All right. So we got some work to do. Now, you can start with this. This is a great book by Austin Kleon. He also lives in Austin. He's actually got two books. I love both of them. One of them is called Steal Like an Artist. The other book is called Show Your Work. All right. And so he talks about the importance of showing your work early. Show people your process. Show them how you think. Because remember, a resume is just a double-sided piece of paper with bullet points. It usually gets pushed into a slush pile, or it's increasingly being read by bots. So if you don't have the exact right words that the AI bots are looking for, then your resume is going to be ignored. So showing your work gives people, recruiters or HR people or other people that you're talking to, the chance to get to know you a little bit more than just a series of bullet points. Because after a while, you look at 10 resumes and you're just like, these all look the same. It's all the same bullet points, it feels like, right? So show your work. Very important thing to do. You can do this with a Squarespace site. Again, lots of easy ways to do it. You don't have to be prolific, but you do have to be consistent, and you have to show what you know, right, intersects with what people are looking for. And then people are going to remember you. The second thing is you got to build relationships. All right. So that means setting a goal for yourself and saying, okay, every week I'm going to reach out to at least one person, right? At least one person on LinkedIn in a category that I'm passionate about, or at a brand that is my dream brand that I want to work at, right? So let's start with using the chat for a second. What are some brands that you would be like, hey, I would love to work at that brand? For me, it would be Patagonia. I love what Patagonia is doing, right? Around sustainability, their mission, everything about Patagonia, I just love, right? So I want to know where would you guys want to work? Because it's all 6 degrees of separation. Maybe it's Pixar. Maybe it's something in the sports industry. Okay. Ryan says Nike. All right. We got 33 other people on this call, or 32 other people on this call. Rare Beauty, Parks Project, Natural Life, Sephora, North Face, Red Bull, Wawa, Urban Outfitters, Beacon Hill. Okay. So wherever you guys put in, all right, go on LinkedIn, do the game of 6 degrees of separation. Who do I know that works at that place that I'm interested in? Or who do I know who knows somebody? So sometimes you got to go 2 or 3 layers deep, right? But you gotta like reach out to the people that work at those places, or work at some place that is somehow associated with that place. So it's not glamorous, but it starts with some list making, right? Pick 3 places that you're most interested, that you buy from or that you follow and you're interested in what they do, and then see if you can get a hold of someone. Because at the end of the day, people still interview people and people hire people, right? So you've got to build relationships with those people. Okay. Now, the third thing is getting an internship, right? Some kind of internship. It doesn't have to be for credit and all that kind of stuff, but there are probably businesses within a 3-mile square radius of where you guys live that you frequent once or twice a week. And you could go to that place and you could say, I've been looking at your social media and I've got some ideas for how we could optimize it. That's a nice way of saying your social media sucks, right? So you go to them and you say, I've laid out a 3-month plan. I'm a student over here. I'm really excited about this stuff. I'm passionate about this stuff. I want to help you. Who's going to say no to that? Right? Very few people are going to say no to that, as long as you're making their lives easier, which is a very interesting question that you can always come back to and ask yourself in the work that you do. Am I making this person's life easier, or am I making it harder? Okay. I'm going to tell you real quick something that I learned when I was at BBDO, New York, which was my boss told me, you're really good at asking questions. And I was like, oh, cool. Thanks. I appreciate the compliment. He said, but you got to make sure for every question you ask, you bring 2 to 3 answers to the table. Otherwise, you're going to be like a pigeon. And pigeons, they come in, they fly in, they shit on everything, and then they fly away. All right. That's what the question is. The question, if you don't have an answer to the question, you're just putting the responsibility on the person in front of you. Hey, I'm asking a really smart question. Do you have the answer? No, and I don't have the answer to 8 other questions that I'm supposed to be answering later today in this meeting or that meeting. You just added one more onto my plate. But if you come to them and you say, I've thought about this, I want to propose a couple of different ways we could answer this question. Now, they may say, look, we tried that answer 3 years ago, it didn't work. They may tell you why your answers aren't good enough, but they're giving you context. So don't give up, right? They're giving you more information to say, okay, how else could we answer this question? So you've got to take the responsibility of not just asking the question, but providing the answer as well. Make sense? All right. So those are the 3 things I would recommend if you want to get a job before graduating. Now, here's how I got a job in planning, all right, at BBDO New York, when I left grad school, when I finished grad school at UT Austin. Started with a random connection, that whole thing about relationships. Somebody I knew was standing somewhere and they struck up a conversation with a guy named Andrew Robertson, who just so happened to be the head of BBDO worldwide. Okay, nobody gets higher than Andrew Robertson. Second thing was, when I found that out, when they started talking, they said, oh, we talked to this guy, Andrew. We said to send him your cover letter and your resume. I was like, who is this guy? I looked him up. I was like, okay, I need to throw out my old cover letter. I need to do something different to get this guy's attention. So I said, dear Mr. Robertson, there's 3 things you need to know about me. Because when you write to an executive, when you're talking to an executive, time is of the essence. They don't waste time. They're very time efficient. So I said, there are 3 things you need to know about me. And if you're still interested, keep reading. So I said, 1, I wear my heart on my sleeve. 2, I believe in doing well by doing good. And number 3, I believe in the power of ideas. And if you're still interested, keep reading and let's talk, right? Which of those 3 things do you think got his attention and kept him reading? Maybe it was all 3, but I found out later that there was one thing in particular. So what do you think in the chat? I want to know what you guys think. 1, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Number 2, I believe in doing well by doing good. 3, I believe in the power of ideas. Okay. I see some people saying power of ideas, power of ideas. Number 1, heart on my sleeve. Okay. I wish it were heart on my sleeve. All right. But it was the power of ideas. Why? Because in advertising, ideas are our currency. We don't make anything. We don't make the physical products. We make the ads, but the ads are just pure idea fuel, right? So yeah, we make the ads, we make the marketing, but it all begins with the power of our ideas. So that got me in the door. He set up some interviews for me with other folks. But before he did that, I was able to also point him to my personal blog. I was able to show my work so that he could get to know me a little bit more. And I would take class assignments, like my favorite or highest scoring class assignments. I put that on my blog. I put my photography on my blog. I just put random musings on my blog, almost like a journal, right? Just short journal entries. That way people could get to know me a little bit more. Now, the 4th thing was I was good at interviewing. All right. Now, after I got hired, I asked my immediate boss, his name is Brent Vartan. I said, why did you hire me? And he said, well, during our interview, you showed a lot of lateral thinking. And I was like, awesome. What is that? I didn't know that I was doing it, but it's something I do unconsciously, which is I describe this in terms of that. And that's a very important skill when you're doing a creative brief, because you might go learn something about, I don't know, TD Ameritrade, how TD Ameritrade works, right? Wealth advisement firm and how people function in that industry. And you got to go give a brief to a creative team who's not going to spend the 20 hours that you just spent learning all about this category. And in 30 seconds, you've got to say, hey guys, you know this? It's like this. The way their business works is like this, right? And so having that ability to think laterally is a really powerful ability. And the other thing too was I think I was successful in turning the interview into a conversation, right? So you don't want an interview to be an interrogation where someone's just asking you questions and you're giving answers. You want to make it a conversation so that they like, I like talking with this person. They're confident. They asked me some questions. That means they're curious, right? They know about me a little bit and the clients we have at our agency. So they're confident, they're curious, and they're just interesting to talk to. I think I would like working with them, right? And so that's a really important thing, to turn the interview not into an interrogation, but into a conversation. Okay. Then the 5th thing is I was in the right place at the right time. BBDO was looking for a senior strategist on the Lowe's home improvement account, and I was just there at the right time. So number 1 and number 5, those were luck. Okay. And there's always a little bit of luck. But numbers 2, 3, and 4, that's how I kept my foot in the door. Right. So I want you guys to think about those things. And if you're like, oh, I'm not very good at interviewing, all right, work on that. Figure out what your story is, right? How are you going to tell your story? So, make sense? Now, here are the jobs I had before I got into planning. You don't have to do what I did. Every person finds their own path, okay? But I did do a lot of things. Now, you're not going to be able to duplicate what I did for number 1 because these don't even exist anymore. But I was a video rental store clerk. All right. I would check videos out to customers. I was a host at California Pizza Kitchen. I was also a busboy at California Pizza Kitchen. I taught English as a second language for a while. I lived in Mexico and I taught there, and I taught in California. I was a national park ranger at Canyonlands National Park for a little while. I was a radio DJ at the same time. I was a writer and a photographer for various publications. I was a professional dog walker for one day. You know those people who carry all the dogs and all the leashes? It's crazy. I did it for one day and I was like, I can do more than this. I've got a college degree. I'm not picking up Fifi's poop anymore. All right. Number 9, I was a brand ambassador for Nivea and Bushmills Irish Whiskey. That was a great job. I can tell you more about it later. I was a documentary filmmaker, and I did get an internship at the RGK Center for Philanthropy and Community Service right before I graduated. All right. So what a lot of these have in common, not all of them, but a lot of them, is storytelling. I learned how to be a good storyteller when I was a radio DJ, when I was a national park ranger. I did the campfire program where I would tell stories to people who came and visited the park. I was a writer and photographer. Being a brand ambassador meant I had to tell a good story about Bushmills Irish whiskey. Being a documentary filmmaker taught me the multimedia skills for how to tell a story in video. Okay? So storytelling is everything. Think about it. When you interview, you're telling a story about yourself. When you're briefing a creative team, you're telling the story of the brand. And then the creative team has to tell the story to end customers, right? You also have to tell the story to the client, to tell them the insights, sell them the insights, sell them the story. So study great stories. All right. Tom and I were talking before you guys got on about A24. His daughter works at, if you don't mind my saying, Tom's daughter works at A24. We were talking about that brand studio. I will always take a second look at if I see A24. I will look at the trailer and see if I'm interested, right? Because stories are what hook us. So study great stories, whether it's television, TikTok stories, right? Stories on TikTok. TikTokers are changing the way stories are told. They do a lot of non-linear storytelling. It's a lot of quick snippets type things. So study great storytelling techniques and become a better storyteller. Make sense? You'll use it in every part of your life, I promise. Even when you're getting married and you got to give those vows, right? You're telling a story at the altar. Oh, when we met, I fell in love and all of that stuff, right? So become a better storyteller. Now, this guy really influenced me. He was dead by the time I got to grad school at UT. But Bill Bernbach had this wonderful quote that said, all of us who professionally use the mass media are the shaper of society. We can vulgarize that society, we can brutalize it, or we can help lift it onto a higher level. And that's what I wanted to do. If you had gotten me 5 years earlier and said, hey, you want to work in advertising? I'd say, no way, man. Advertising, it's brainwashing. It's terrible. I hate advertising. That's because there's a lot of bad ads. Okay. We've all seen plenty of bad ads. But this quote kind of turned my mind around. The reason I went back to grad school was because I wanted to do a better job. I wanted to be on team great advertising. Right. And so that was why I went back and why I studied advertising. So I got hired at BBDO. Then I got recruited at GST&M, and I worked on all these cool, interesting brands. Maybe not as cool as some brands, but I learned a lot on these different brands, especially also the nonprofits. Because remember, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I want to do well by doing good. So I always raise my hand at the agency. Someone say, hey, we need help. We're working on a pro bono thing for Conservation International. Who's interested? Me. I want to be right there, right? We're working on this awards entry for this brand. How can I help? Right? So I always say, raise your hand. Raise your hand in 2 ways. Raise your hand to say, I can help, and learn to raise your hand when you say, I need help. Okay? I need help. I'm in over my head. I need some help. I don't understand something. Don't be shy about asking for help. Okay? So those 2 things, raise your hand. Then I started Gallant. When my daughter was 9 months old, I thought, why not leave the safety and security of a good paycheck from GSD&M and start my own agency? Let's see how that works out. It certainly motivates you, makes you work extra hard because you got to put food on the table. So I kind of blackmailed myself by starting Gallant. Okay. And we worked on all these different brands. We do a lot of work with consumer packaged goods brands, CPG brands. Okay. But we also do a lot of work with B2B businesses, things like that. So round about that same time, I had my first book come out, which was the Practical Pocket Guide to Account Planning. And all these people in the industry started saying good things about it. And so they use this book because and the question behind the book or underneath the book, the reason why I wrote it was because when I was at BDO and GSD, and I asked planners, how long did it take you before you really understood what you were doing in this job? Because strategists get a real grab bag of questions. We get asked all kinds of things from all kinds of angles. And as a strategist, you're like, yeah, I can figure that out. Because at the end of the day, we're problem solvers. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. And so people would answer that question. They'd say, well, about 2 years. It took me about 2 years before I understood what this job was all about and how I could really help. And I was like, 2 years? That's a long time. Could you imagine working at Domino's or a burger place and being like, I don't know what I'm doing for 2 years? No, like you're going to know pretty quickly. So I was like, how can I reduce the learning curve from 2 years to 2 hours? And so I wrote this book. It's just a real fast, punchy book. Okay. But it's focused on how do you become a better strategist very quickly. So you're adding value on day one, not 2 years later. And there was this chapter inside that book called Finding Insights. And it was like 3 pages long, the chapter. And professors and students had come up to me and professionals, and they would say, I really liked that chapter, but I wish it were longer. So I was like, okay, I'll work on a second edition. I'll make it longer. So I start working on the second edition. I start asking questions about insights to people to go deeper on the topic. And then that chapter turned into its own book because there was a question at the center that really started confusing me. And it was this question: what the fuggadocchio is an insight? Right? Because I would ask strategists and creative directors and all these different people, what's an insight? What does an insight mean to you? Right? And they would give me different answers. And I was like, this is crazy. Everybody's got a different answer. So I need to define what this thing is. So I started by defining what it's not. Now you guys have all gotten the book, right? You guys have all read the book, maybe read it twice. Oh, you're on mute, Tom.
The book is on my suggested list of things to purchase.
Okay,
We have to keep our costs down. So, needless to say, this was one that I said everybody needs to buy it.
gotcha. So it's $10 on Kindle. Two Starbucks coffees, and you've got what you need, right? So so I started with this idea of an insight is not blank. And that's a really important thing for you too, to define your personal brand. Who am I not before I try to figure out who I am, right? I would not say this. I would not say that. I don't hang with these people. I don't do these things. Figure out who you're not in an effort to figure out who you are. That's what even the word define means, is to set up boundaries. To define something means to take certain things away. So I figured out in the process that an insight is not a data point. A lot of people will say, oh, I've got an insight. 75% of consumers do blank. You say, well, that's not an insight. That's just a data point. Let's call a data point a data point. It's not a trend. That's just a collection of data points. It's not a human truth. It's not a personal observation. And it's certainly not a headline or a tagline. Okay? It's not any of those things. Those things can be helpful to getting you closer to an insight, but they're not the insight in and of themselves. Okay? So my definition of an insight is it's like this constellation, right? Anybody ever seen a constellation before? Show of hands. You guys have all seen constellations, right? When you look up at the sky, you see the stars, the brightest stars in the sky, and everybody else can see those bright stars, but not everybody knows which stars connect with which ones to make the constellation, right? Most people now at this point know the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, right? Cassiopeia, things like that. But so my definition of an insight is it's all of these things coming together. It's a data point connecting to a larger trend, connecting to an observation, connecting to maybe a very big customer pain point, connecting to a personal experience, which connects to a big cultural shift, which connects to a human truth. It's all of those things coming together, right? That's my definition of an insight. It's a constellation where all these things come together, right? So it's yes and. It's data and trends and truths and maybe even something from a dream you had, right? Don't discount dreams, right? And ultimately, it's that careful articulation. That last part, that's the last tenth of a mile, and that's the really hard work. This is going to sound weird, but study haikus, study poetry, right? How do people say things in such a short amount of space, but be so powerful and so effective? Anybody like poetry? Anybody like a good haiku? All right. So look at the great writers and how they're able to do that. Mark Twain has a great quote. I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's easy to do a brain dump and just be like, oh, I'm just going to say all this stuff. But to get it down to its quintessential essence, that's the hard work, right? So if you ever feel like, oh, I've got an insight, you can go ahead and gut check yourself, right? With this handy little insight checklist. So the first thing is, does your insight, when you share it with someone, does it inspire action? Do they start taking notes? Do they get that light in their eyes? It's like, oh my gosh, you've just given me a whole new way to think about things, right? Second thing is, it's got to be not obvious, right? It's got to reframe the problem in an interesting way. The third thing is, it's got to be simple to explain. Remember, use the rule of billboards, all right? Billboards, maximum 10 to 12 words, or really 7 to 10 words, all right, is what billboards have to be written in. So brief, very concise. The fourth thing is, it does have to include some data and observations or trends. It can't just be, oh, I got a gut feel on this. You're going to have to back it up, because when you're presenting to an executive and you're saying, I think this is the insight you should bet the farm on, and you're going to spend $20 million on this campaign, they're going to need a little data to back it up. All right. So the fourth thing is, it's got to tie back to your brand. It's got to give your brand a clear advantage. If it doesn't tie back to your brand, it's not an insight. Sorry, it's just an interesting thing. It's got to, because it's got to lead the brand to action. And it's got to, it does help if there's a human truth nestled inside your insight, right? Something that every human can relate to. And then finally, tapping into a cultural tension. It doesn't always have to tap into a cultural tension, but if it does, it's really going to help. So if you can check the box on 5 of these 7 things, you're probably on your way to having a real bona fide, genuine insight. All right. Now, when you get an insight, it feels like this. You have that moment. Anybody ever, show of hands here, anybody have that moment where you're thinking, you're looking around and you're like, I think I just realized something nobody else has realized. Yeah? Anybody? Come on, you guys, everybody's had it. Now, unfortunately, what happens is you tell someone, they're like, oh yeah, I thought of that 5 years ago. And you're like, damn it. I thought I was on to something new. Okay, but keep going with it. Write those things down. Every time you're like, oh, I got something new. So strategists, great strategists, are note takers. They're always walking around. I used to walk around and take notes, in a little pad, but now I just do it on my phone. I use the notes app on my phone, and to get the idea out of my head as fast as possible, I use speech to text. I don't type anymore. Okay, it's always speech to text, right? Because I want to get it out of me as fast as possible so I don't forget it. People always think, oh, I'll remember that later. No, you won't. Too many distractions in life. You write something down, you'll be more likely to remember it, okay? So you get that idea and it feels like this. Then you start trying to articulate, what is this idea? I need to put it into as few words as possible. I need to make it clear. And you write and you write and you write, and you end up looking like this, all right? It ends up feeling like this. Now all of a sudden you're like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, okay? Because it's taken forever to get there and you're just exhausted. So remember, it's a process, okay? So how do you build an insight? That's the question. Now, we're going to get into a much more interactive piece here. We're going to stretch those insight muscles, okay? So what does it say on the screen? First person gets a wonderful door prize from Tom. Tom's going to give you the door prize. He'll give you tickets to a new A24 film premiere, all right? No, I'm just kidding.
We could do it. No, my daughter has made that happen before. We could do that.
So what do you guys see on the screen? What does it say? This is the skill.
Ryan says find the patterns.
Ryan, there you go. First one. Thank you, Ryan. All right. It says find the patterns. So you got to be able to see the truth inside the noise. You got to find the patterns inside the noise of the everyday fads and or trends. And sometimes they're counterintuitive patterns. Let's see. We're going to go from easy to intermediate.
Ryan, by the way, Ryan has just won a Kindle book copy of your book.
Awesome.
Everyone that answers these questions right today will be getting a Kindle copy of your book from your professor, sharing his birthday with all of you by buying you the gifts instead of me.
Wow. That is a pretty cool. I've never had a professor do that. That is very kind of you, Tom, especially on your birthday. Did you guys know it was his birthday today?
No, they don't know that. Gwen
Now
was
they
first.
do.
So, Gwen, you get a book too.
Now they do. All right. So what do you guys see in here? Okay. What do you guys see in this? This one's harder. This is more intermediate level stuff. Okay. So this is a magic eye painting from, they were very popular in the 1990s. Magic eye painting. Can you guys see what's inside all of these squiggly lines? Because there is something. Anybody want to guess? Now, you got to get it right to get the book for this one. Just guessing, I don't think should quite get the prize for this one, but this is harder stuff, okay? What do you guys
Only
see?
right answers get prizes.
Yep. So what do you guys see? But being brave and just putting it out there in the first place is worth its weight in gold, okay? So what do you guys see? Shout it out if you see anything or you think you see something. Any guesses? Any guesses? All right, I'm going to reveal, and then you might be like, oh man, I saw that. Why didn't I say it? I could have gotten a book. Anybody see seahorses? The seahorses are hiding in there. All right. To be fair, in all the time I've ever shown this picture over the past year, only 2 people have ever gotten it because it's hard. Okay. But I'm trying to encourage you guys by not just telling you, but showing you. And we're going to keep going. All right. What do you guys see here? How many people show hands? How many people see a young woman? Show of hands. How many people see an older woman? Show of hands. Okay. How many people can go back and forth? Keep switching back and forth, right? That's what you have to be able to do as a strategist. You have to be able to hold 2 contradictory things in your mind at the same time and not just discount something because it's on the periphery. All right. So that's a very important skill that planners have to bring to the table. What do you guys see here? All right. This one's going to get a prize for the first person to be brave enough to say what they really see. You got to be brave in this business. You got to say, here's what I see. This is the truth as I see it. Miles says he sees a pregnant lady. Okay, pregnant woman with a child. Somebody on this call must have let out a laugh when they saw this because everybody always does. A pregnant woman with a child is not what made you laugh. That's the earnest, serious thing. A pregnant woman parking. Okay, sure. Pregnant woman parking. Jess says dancing. Someone says scissors. Yep, it does look like that thing is scissors. Nobody's going to say it. Nobody's going to be brave
Looks
enough.
like somebody's going to the bathroom. I hate to say it.
Pac-Man, someone going to the bathroom.
The
All
one on
right.
the left looks like they're sitting down.
Looks like they could be sitting down. I hear a lot of people say someone is twerking on the left in front of a barbecue. All right. Twerking in front of a barbecue, dropping it back. Okay. I get that a lot from people. And a lot of times when I'm in a physical classroom or I'm talking to an agency, there will be an audible set of like people laughing or chuckling, and they'll turn to a friend and they'll say, so you see that? Right. And so here's the thing. Here's the lesson underneath this image, which is you've got to be brave enough to say the thing that you see that's on your mind, right? It might not be the most popular thing. Other people might be like, I don't see it. But then again, people don't see the constellations at first either. You say, oh, you see that, those all connect. That's the constellation, right? So there's a certain amount of bravery that you have to bring to this business, which brings us back to connecting the dots. Anybody like the CSI type shows, the True Detective shows? Anybody watch those? All right. What are some of your favorite shows? Put them in the chat. I want to know what some of your favorite CSI style shows are. This is a softball question. This is easy. Criminal Minds, ID, Criminal Minds again. Anybody watch True Detective? True Detective HBO movies. Anybody watch the Knives Out movies? Those the mysteries,
Yeah. Those are good.
right? So that's what we do. Again, we connect the dots, and we've got a lot more in common with Sherlock Holmes than we do anything else. That's a pretty cool job when you stop and think about it, right? getting to chase down clues and try to connect the dots and figure out, what motivated this person or who they're connected to and how this whole thing works, right? That's a pretty cool job. That's what I get paid to do. Okay. Now, the thing is, we look for these patterns. We try to connect the dots and find these patterns because we're really trying to find a break in the pattern. That's the big thing. That's the counterintuitive thing. We're trying to find a break in the pattern because that's how we stand out, right? And that is biologically, we're going against hundreds of thousands or millions of years of evolution, right? Because what happens if you stand out in nature? Who wants to put that answer in the chat? What happens if you're a wildebeest and you leave the herd and you stand out? What's going to happen to you? This is an easy question, right? You guys know what happens. Who's going to say it? Who's going to put it in the chat? You get eaten, right? You get eaten by a lion or by a hyena or by something. What happens in middle school or high school if you stand out just a little too much? You're a little too different. What happens then? You don't get eaten, but you get bullied, you get picked on. But guess what? If you can make it through the bullying, you get stronger, right? So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So I'm not saying bullying is good, but I'm saying you guys are all here and you guys have gotten stronger and you've gotten better. You said, look, I know who I am. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to be different. I'm going to help stand out. So marketing is the exact opposite of the rules of nature. You want to stand out. Okay. In marketing, you want your brands to stand out. You want your personal brand to stand out, right? Because when you're going for a job, you got to convince them, hey, I'm not only better than the other candidates, I'm different. Different is better than better. Okay. Remember that. That's very important for brands and for yourselves. Different is better than better. I always like to say there can only be one Lady Gaga. There can only be one Beyonce. Anybody else shows up to something in a meat dress, the way that Lady Gaga did, they say, she already did that. You're just a copycat brand, right? So you got to be different to stand out. All right. Any questions so far? Because this is the thing. This is the summary, right? We go from patterns and anti-patterns to that gets us closer to an insight, which leads us to some fresh new ideas, which leads to action. Action on the part of the client, action on the part of the creative team, action on the part of your customers. Okay? So I believe there are 3 types of insights. First one is category insights. All right. We talked about this. You got all these things connecting the dots. Well, here's how we're going to see how this brand connected the dots. Everybody know this brand? Show of hands. Everybody sharing passwords? Good, good. All right. So it started with a tech shift, new tech from VHS to DVDs. If that tech shift had never happened, right? If we were still in the land of VHS, Netflix never would have gotten started because you can't send a VHS in the mail for free. It's just too expensive, right? So the lightweight, thin DVD is easy to put in the mail and it's low cost, right? Another big thing, big cultural shift from in-person browsing to online browsing. Amazon started in 1994. Netflix started in 1997. That's not an accident, okay? Because Netflix realized the same thing that Amazon realized, which is that the way people decide, at least with books and with movies, how do people decide on a movie? Anybody want to shout this out? Does anybody remember going to the video store when you were younger? A bygone era? You'd pick up the thing off the shelf, you look at the back, you say, that doesn't interest me. I don't want to watch that, right? And so they put their catalog onto Netflix and they said, hey, you can just read what all the movies are about and then you choose. That doesn't have to be in a brick and mortar store. They also knew that there was a big customer pain point, annoying late fees. Blockbuster charged $800 million in late fees in 1 year. That was 16% of their revenue. Yay for the shareholders. Not good for customers. Customers are like, I hate these late fees, right? Number 2, customer pain point number 2, never enough copies of the video I want. And finally, number 3, right? Just going to the video store in the first place. People didn't actually really like doing that. They thought they did, but when they found out they could get it delivered to them, they're like, I like that better. Okay. So that led to this whole business model shift. They created a whole new category, right? From rentals to subscription. That was a big change. We're not going to be in a brick and mortar store anymore. We're going to do rentals to subscription. We're going to use a totally different delivery system, the United States Postal Service, and we're going to use data-driven recommendations just like Amazon. If you like this, you're going to like this. That's what's going to keep people coming back because it's going to be sticky. It's going to be data-driven recommendations. Make sense? Everybody could see those stars in the sky. Everybody knew they hated late fees. Everybody knew there was a problem of not getting the video they wanted. Everybody could see the shift from VHS to DVDs. Almost everybody had probably tried doing something on Amazon at some point, right? So those stars were in the sky for everyone to see. But only the founders of Netflix put it all together and connected those dots and said, we got a new business idea. Takes bravery. Everybody remember the red envelopes? Right? This was, their value proposition that they just hammered people with again and again. They said, look, free shipping. Well, I love free. I don't have to put a postage stamp. Imagine how fewer people would have signed up if you said, you're going to have to put a stamp on every envelope. No, right? Free shipping both ways. No late fees. Oh, right away, I'm going to sign up because I've got so many late fees from Blockbuster. 80,000 titles. Well, that's a lot more than I can get in my local video store in terms of access. Many of them might be crap, but you got a lot of them. And then I can cancel anytime, so I'm not locked into this thing. Why wouldn't I? $7.99 was the initial price point. Okay? That's how much it was. That was like 2 video rentals from Blockbuster. It was like $4 a pop. Okay? So let's look at another example. Is this making sense so far? Create a new category. Insights can help you create a new category. Airbnb. And by the way, this isn't stuff, the stuff you're getting right now, this isn't even in the book. I need to put this stuff into a second edition of a book, but you know what happens when I try to make a second edition, a new book comes out. So, I don't know. I don't know what to do. So you guys are getting stuff that's not even in the book, right? So Airbnb is another brand that created a whole new category. And it started with a little bit of an observation. All this excess housing inventory. Because people were buying houses and trying to flip them, but then you had a little bit of a problem, right? You had the big economic crash, but that turned into this trend of like, hey, instead of owning something, let's rent it, right? If you've got a house, you could rent it out. That's a possibility. Like I said, there was this housing crash, and then there was some new tech about a housing inventory management system. You had this tech trend. You guys remember when the first iPhone came out? 2007. So smartphones came out right before Airbnb came out. That was a little bit of a trigger, another tech trend, that you could take pictures on your phone and then mail them places. You didn't need like a third-party camera anymore. You could do it that way. Another big thing was this UX trend, two-way online reviews, right? Yeah, you're going to rent my house, but you're going to review my house, but I'm going to review you. That was a big shift. That was a big UX trend that nobody had ever seen before. A big generational trend, millennials' desire for unique non-corporate destinations. Hey, I'm unique. I want a unique place to stay, right? So that led to this whole category, new category of peer-to-peer rentals, which turned out to be lower cost, give you those unique experiences, and make you feel like a local, right? So again, connecting the dots, not easy. A lot of things had to happen to connect those dots, but people could see those things in the market. They just didn't connect the dots the way that Airbnb did, or there was a company called HomeAway. There have been some other startups that tried a similar thing, but Airbnb has come out on top by and large, okay? And they did it with this video. So I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a second so that I can reshare, but I'm gonna click something, share sound. And now we can go back and you guys will be able to hear it. Okay? You guys ready for the video? All right, here we go. This is how they launched.
Dear stranger, when I booked this trip, my friend said I was crazy. Why would I stay in someone else's house? But this morning, a city I've never been to felt like one I already knew. Everyone in your neighborhood was so warm and friendly. And your home home was perfect and peaceful. Oh, and then I met your friends. They reminded me of my friends. It felt like I had known them for years. It was almost like family. I just wanted to thank you for sharing your world with me. It felt like home. Airbnb, belong anywhere.
All right. Big anthem spot, comes out and certainly pulls on your heartstrings. I get a little bit of a tingle every time I watch that video because it's just really well done. Nice music, nice cuts, feels like a continuous kind of thing. So, but Airbnb continues to grow beyond that, right? And so they've got some very interesting user experience additions that didn't exist in the beginning, right? The OMG category. Who wouldn't want to stay in a spaceship, right? Or in this little hobbit creature earthlings thing, or the Arctic category. So they've kind of revolutionized different ways to think about the categories of houses or places that you might stay, right? And more recently, they've come up with this whole icons thing, which is a great PR play, great advertising campaign, where they're basically creating these experiences from scratch, or they're retrofitting places. You can spend a night at the Ferrari Museum. You can spend a night at the X Mansion, or you can spend a night on Fade's tour bus, right? So they've created this whole series of iconographic or icon type locations to stay top of mind for people, right? So it's not just a house, it's these other things. Does that make sense? It's a pretty cool extension for the brand. All right, so that's the first thing, creating new categories. The second thing is reframing an existing category. Those are brand insights, okay? And again, it started a little bit differently, but it started with an observation. Musicians pouring out Red Bull backstage and filling the can with water. Mike Cesario, the founder of Liquid Death, saw musicians doing that. And he was like, that's weird. Why are they doing that? Well, the answer is, if Red Bull's the sponsor of the concert, or one of the main sponsors, you got to have a can of Red Bull on stage. That's a contractual obligation. But, when you notice the weird things, make note of it. Take notes about the weird things, the things that stand out to you that are interesting or unusual. Then he connected the dots between that and, a big trend that's been around for 30 years. Customers want water on the go. That's an important trend that we all know about. But there's also a cultural tension. Most water comes in plastic bottles. And a lot of people are concerned about plastic pollution. Anybody here concerned about plastic pollution? Does that keep anybody up at night sometimes? Man, there's so much plastic, all right? So they said, well, let's put our water in an infinitely recyclable can instead of plastic. Okay, that's an interesting idea. There's another big trend going on where millennials and Gen Z are turning away from soda and beer. Okay? I don't know what's wrong with the kids these days, not drinking enough beer. Just kidding. Just kidding. But that is a big trend that you can see in the data. Another what if idea. What if we made our water look like an energy drink or a beer? Those look cool. Most water brands don't look very cool, right? So when you're standing at a party and you're like, I don't want a beer, and maybe I don't want to drink any soda either, you can still look cool with a can of Liquid Death in your hand. So, that's an interesting idea. What if we made fun of all marketing conventions in the category? Has anybody seen Liquid Death? You guys know Liquid Death? Everybody's heard of this brand, right? Okay, they're always making fun of whatever's going on in the category. And then finally, they reframe the category with this idea that, look, all water brands are focused on purity. Let's be anti-pure. Let's be anti-corporate, right? Let's be punk or heavy metal. Let's stick it to the man with our brand, right? Because after all, it's just water. In fact, the hardest thing for them, and I just interviewed, Tom mentioned earlier the podcast, I just interviewed the VP of Creative at Liquid Death for the podcast. His name is Andy Pearson. Had a great conversation. That episode is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. But the hardest thing for them is because it's called Liquid Death, people are like, is that poison? I don't want to drink poison. So they've got to balance it with this line. Don't be scared. It's just water, right? And they came out, this was their ad that they came out with on Facebook early on when they first launched.
Hi, I'm a professional actor, and I'm getting paid to tell you about a revolutionary new product.
Mountain water.
For years, a bunch of marketing fuckboys have tricked you into thinking that water is just some girly drink for yoga moms. Just look at all the cute brand names and dainty little bottles. Well, hold on to your hot dogs, because I got news. Water isn't cute. Water is deadly. It kills innocent surfers and snowboarders and kayakers. Every year, water is responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths. Energy drinks only kill like, what, 1 or 2 kids? So please, don't fall for the marketing bullshit. Water is not yoga. Water is liquid death. And that's why this brand needs to exist, to finally give water the ice-cold can and ice-cold name it deserves. A brand that parents will hate, but kids might love.
Liquid death, mountain water.
Made from the deadliest stuff on earth. Please, enjoy responsibly.
So pretty amazing. 1 minute, a little over 1 minute long. Lots of twists, lots of turns. That's another thing I would recommend. And real quick, I want to do a quick pause because I didn't ask this at the outset. But again, this is a very easy question. You guys have any favorite comedians? Because comedians are great at finding situational humor and daily observations about the ridiculous things that we do in life. And that's all this ad is doing, right? This ad is just pointing out the ridiculousness of the water category and making fun of it and saying, you know, water is not cute. In fact, it causes a lot of deaths. Like you could totally imagine a comedian on stage saying something like that, right? So I want to know from you guys, who are some of your favorite comedians? All right. Shout them out in the chat, if you would be so kind. They don't have to be.
There's got to be some comedians. Shane Gillis is coming up a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Who
Shane
else?
Gillis.
Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to write some of these down in case I don't know some of them.
Adam Ray.
I know a lot of the ones you guys have mentioned.
Shane Gillis. Robin Williams again.
Mm-hmm. Any female comedians? Very interesting. Very few people ever tend to shout out women comedians, which makes me feel like there's a bit of a tension in the comedy community.
Bill Burr.
So male dominated.
I don't see any female comedians.
No female comedians. Wanda Sykes, Hannah Gatsby.
Wanda Sykes lives in Media, PA.
Mm-hmm. Taylor Tomlinson. She's pretty big right now. Ali Wong just released another special. She's no longer pregnant like she was in the last special, which is kind of funny. All right. So, study great comedians. What do they do to build tension? What are the things, what are the everyday life moments that they just point out and put in front of us and say, isn't that ridiculous? Right? So it's a very powerful technique, all right? We're going to look at another brand that reframed an entire category. Remember, they didn't create a new category, they reframed it. They reframed it, okay? So Blue Land, anybody heard of Blue Land? Probably not. It's not as big as Liquid Death, but it's an interesting thing. So that started with an observation. Household cleaners are 98% water. Anybody have a household cleaner at home? You guys ever clean the countertop? Or a window? Or a mirror? Or something? You usually spray something on the countertop, right? That's a household cleaner. Or a toilet, anything, right? It's mostly water, right? So it's ironic, we're still talking about water, even though we're not talking about liquid death. So there was some survey data also out there that said, look, cleaning products are low interest and low loyalty. People usually just buy what's on sale. They don't, it's not like shampoo, where they're like, oh, this is my favorite shampoo. They're just like, hey, if it's on sale and it smells halfway decent, I'll get it. Doesn't matter to me, right? Sustainability trend. Again, back to that thing. Customers are concerned with microplastics, single-use plastics, climate change. People are concerned about that. So then Blue Land had this what if idea. What if we stopped bottling water and that would help us reduce shipping costs, and then we could charge less for our cleaners, right? It's an interesting idea. A why question. Why ship all this water when you can fill up a bottle at home? Right? Doesn't that make more sense? Everybody's got a spigot at home or a faucet at home. So they reframe the category with their patent pending tablets. And again, similar to Netflix, this whole subscription model, right? So they reframed the household category of cleaners by doing that. And this is what they look like. So they'll ship you an entirely, they call them forever bottles, but they ship you these bottles, and then you just get these little tablets, and you've got like a little bit of, sort of concentrate, and then you just fill it up with water at home. And it's really cheap and easy to just ship tablets. And they do it for toilets, and they do it for everything, right? So it's a very sustainable way. And again, you don't have to go out and buy it. You don't have to go to the store, and sometimes you forget. So you just get shipped to your house, very much like Netflix, but they reframed the category of household cleaners. They didn't create a brand new category. I guess you could say it's a new category in terms of like, stuff shipped to you, but I would say that they reframed the cleaning category. Then the third kind of insight is campaign insights. All right. So the third kind is campaign insights. Everybody heard of this brand? Show of hands. Anybody have this brand sometime in the past month? Yeah? No? You guys are all eating protein-rich power bars. All right. So, first thing, starts with a human truth. When you're hungry, you're low on energy. Everybody say that's true? That can be true, right? But this is kind of what I would call the boring human truth. And this actually led to a problem for Snickers. Because in some markets, remember, it's a global brand. So in some markets like Russia and Mexico and a few other countries, they were perceived as an energy bar brand. Believe it or not, Snickers in some markets was seen as an energy bar brand because of this idea that, hey, you're low on energy, so eat a Snickers, you'll have more energy. Well, of course you will. Anything with that much sugar will give you energy for a little bit. All right. So they reframe the truth. And this is a really powerful technique. They reframe the truth to say an empty stomach can change the way you act. That's a totally different springboard, right? It can change the way you act. So real quick in the chat, how do you act when you get hungry? What are the different levels that you start to act? You go from, I'm just a little bit hungry, so I start to act like this. Then I get even hungrier and I start to act like this. Then I get really hungry and it's just all bets are off. So just throw some words in the chat, guys. How do you act when you are hungry? Let's see if you end up in the same place that Snickers ended up. I'm ready when you are.
Yeah, come on. Where's those insights, gentlemen and ladies? Come on, come on, come on.
You get angry. Do you go from 0 to angry? You get irritable. I love it. Now we're getting into some places. Irritable, grumpy. What else? What other words come to mind? Annoyed. Short-fused. Impatient. Excellent. Easily bothered. Yes. Okay. Loose rationality or irrational. That's a great one. Okay. So excellent stuff. All right. So interrogating language is a technique that we use that I talk about in the book, right? So different states of hunger. You get testy, cranky, snippy, hangry. That's a hybrid word that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. Snickers came up with that word as part of the campaign. Okay. So it's a very interesting idea. So campaign iteration number 1, you're not you when you're hungry. We've all seen the Betty White ad, right? Number 2, you make mistakes when you're hungry. And number 3, from hangry to unfiltered. Okay? So So there's a lot of ways to iterate on this campaign. And the reason why I say campaign insights, this campaign in one form or another has been running since 2010. So it's 14 years old, right? And they just keep iterating on the same thing. And here's the thing that I'm going to tell you that, is again counterintuitive. You might lean in and say, why do you say that? But great campaigns are formulaic. That sounds weird because people think, oh no, I don't want a formula. Yeah, you do. You want to dial into a formula that makes people want to look for the next iteration. Just like a television episode, right? Oh, what's going to be next? I want to know, how are they going to raise the stakes? How are they going to take this? I know the formula, so I'm interested in where they're going to go with it next, right? So, like I said, you guys have all seen the Betty White ad, right? I'm assuming. I'm not going to show it to you, but I am going to show you the Japanese version. Okay? So, when I say great ads are formulaic, great campaigns are formulaic, you don't need to speak a word of Japanese or Russian to understand what's going on in this ad.
Не хочу больше играть. И все. Ой, まだ試合終わってねえぞ。ほら、機嫌直して。
Как уже надоели,
больше?
こいつら腹減るとタトゥーみたいにわがままになるんだ。ほら、スニッカーズ。
どう？お腹が空いたらスニッカーズ。
え、バッターも。
You guys know exactly what happened because it's the same formula for every campaign around the world, whether it's with Ronaldo in Brazil or it's in Japan. It's basically, you're not acting like yourself. You're acting like a diva. You're acting like Betty White. You're acting like these Russian pop stars. And then you're going to eat a Snickers and your friends or whatever are going to say, you feeling better? And you're going to be like, yep. And then in Japan, you're going to say, Snickers. Okay. So, and then after so many years of running this campaign, they're like, okay, times have changed a little bit. We're still going to be rooted in, you're not you when you're hungry, but how could we twist that? You're unfiltered when you're hungry. Let's see what they did.
All right, game.
Hey, do you guys want to do a little swap?
I mean, yeah, I could be into it. Would I move in with Tyler, or is it just more, one time casual thing?
I was talking about switching up teams for fun.
Of course. Whose turn is it anyway?
Tyler's, apparently.
All right, so a little racy, a little edgy, right? But this idea that when you're hungry, you become unfiltered. You say things that you wish you could take back. Anybody ever been there? Anybody ever said something because you're loosely rational and you say something that you didn't mean to say?
All right.
So that's Snickers. All right. Everybody heard of Dove? Everybody knows this campaign, right? Well, how did that happen? So beauty standards, starting out with this observation that everybody could see. Beauty standards in most media are unrealistic. Anybody ever feel that way? Anybody ever look at beauty ads and be like, that's impossible. I can't look like that, right? And it has an effect on our psychological well-being. So Dove commissioned some ethnographic research around cultural beauty stereotypes and the psychology of self-esteem. You can look it up. It's a very interesting study. They also did a survey with 3,000 women across 10 countries, and a shocking only 2% of respondents thought they were attractive. That's unbelievable. That's a really important way to start a presentation, by the way, is with a shocking statistic, okay? But that wasn't enough to sell the team at Dove to do this kind of campaign. So they had to go one step further, the team. They did some additional research and they did interviews with wives and daughters of senior stakeholders at Dove. And when it's your wife or your daughter telling you something that was the same thing in the survey, that's powerful. That makes you stop and think, maybe we need to give this idea a second look, right? And there was this whole cultural tension as well, building off of that observation of beauty standards are unrealistic. When we're kids, we're told beauty is what's inside, right? Have we all heard that before? Beauty is what's on the inside. But then as you get older, the beauty industry tells you, nah, beauty's just skin deep. You know, you got to pluck and twist and tweak and do all these different things to your hair and your eyelashes and everything else to look a certain way. And it's not just for women. This whole thing is also affecting men as well. You got to have the six-pack abs and you got to do this and the that. So it's out there for both men and women. So then Dove came forward and said, hey, let's interrogate some language here and let's make a campaign around what is real beauty. What does that really mean? And so they came up, you know, with many parts of a campaign, and we're kind of getting close to short on time, right? We got about 10 minutes, is that right? So I'm not going to show you this because I want to show you a couple of the techniques that are in the book and get there. But you know, we've probably all seen this anthem spot from Dove that shows the woman getting photoshopped like crazy. I mean, she's already, you know, attractive to begin with, but then they make her neck bigger in Photoshop and they taller and all these other things, right? So we're not going to, but you can check it out. So what about consumer insights? People always ask, well, what about consumer insights? And I say, I'm on the fence about it. Because if you articulate it in a very interesting or different way, then maybe you might have an insight. But more often than not, people say they've got a consumer insight when really they just have an observation or they have a data point about consumers. And that brings me back to, hey, let's call a data point a data point. Let's call an observation an observation. But if you take that observation or you reframe it and you get to a totally different thing that nobody's ever said quite that way before, I could call that an insight, you know, but most of the time that's not the case. Okay. So any questions so far before we get into the actual techniques? Again, part of the job of being a planner, of a strategist, of being in advertising is being curious. So if I've said anything today, anything at all that has made you curious, made you wonder, Chris, how'd you start your agency? Chris, where'd you get the idea for the first book? Well, I already told you about the idea for the first book. Chris, where'd you get the idea for blah, blah? Ask it, right? That's that part of that bravery, okay?
You could ask it in the chat and I'll read it if you want me to.
Yeah, okay? I know it's hard because you got a bunch of other classmates and it's kind of early. You're like, oh, I don't want to look stupid. But that's the thing is you got to be brave enough in this business to stand out. We talked about that before.
Yeah,
right?
I think the fact that you gave such amazing advice on finding a job, that's always a question in their minds. You answered it right at the beginning of this session.
I try to be a preemptive question answerer. You know, I've given this talk a few times. Okay, this isn't my first rodeo. And I didn't used to have those slides in the up front, but I like to begin that way when I'm talking with college students because I feel like that's probably the first and foremost thing on their mind. What are you going to say to me, Chris, that's going to help me with the thing that keeps me up at night? The thing that keeps me up at night, one of the things that keeps me up at night if I'm a college student is how am I going to get a job? Right? And I'm also going to have to pay off those student loans. So how am I going to get a job to help me pay off those student loans so that I can be independent and you know, live the life, the independent life I want, right? So if you don't want to ask me the question now, you can always ask me a question on LinkedIn, okay? And we can continue the conversation over there. But let's keep moving, all right? Sound good? We got a little bit of time left. So we're going to talk about techniques for building insights. And I'm going to fly through these techniques because we only got 6 minutes, all right? So keep asking why, create conflict, reframe the question. There are 7 techniques in the book, and I've actually developed like a total of 12 techniques so far. But again, I got to make a second edition of the book, but reframe the question is the third one here. So why do we ask why? We got to unlearn what we've learned. When we're kids, we ask why all the time. And then our teachers, no offense, Tom, I'm sure you don't do this, but teachers in elementary school, sometimes our parents, what do they say? They say, stop asking why, kid, right? I'm tired of you asking me why. But it's serious business asking why. It's also funny business. Like you guys mentioned Robin Williams. He's got a great quote. Why do they call it rush hour when nothing moves? Right? Kind of makes you stop, makes you think. In 1957, a little girl and her dad are walking on the beach, as the story goes, and she says, Daddy, why do we have to wait for a picture? Now, I don't know if she was a British kid, but it makes for a good story. But that was what led to the creation of the Polaroid camera. Instantaneous picture, which didn't exist before, Okay. In 2013, a mom who was nursing her baby was like, why do all these other moms nurse their babies in bathroom stalls? Like me, right? That was a big question. That's a terrible place to make a meal. Could you imagine going to a restaurant and be like, I'll have the filet mignon. Okay, let me go make that in a bathroom stall. You'd be like, that's disgusting. Okay? But that's how women were doing it. And so she said, no, not anymore. And she made these things called Mamava. They're Mamava lactation pods. You can see them in all airports across the country, sports stadiums, universities. It's just a clean, spacious, freestanding place for moms and dads to feed their babies when they're on the go, right? If you're going to bottle feed or you're going to pump or you're going to nurse, all right? In 2019, Warby Parker asked the question, why do people have to go to the store to get glasses, to try glasses on? Well, with augmented reality, with that tech shift, you don't, right? You can try them on and look really good. You can't feel the weight of the glasses, but you can try them on. And sometimes the internet will give you ideas, right? So, Samsung said, hey, the new fridge will ping you on your phone if you leave the door open. Well, that's a pretty cool innovation, right? But then a question from the audience out there in the internet asked, why doesn't it just close the door itself if it's so smart, right? So listen to the internet for good why questions and keep asking why on your end, okay? Next technique is to create conflict, right? So why do we do that? We create conflict to get past people's canned responses. You do that by adding the word or into a question, right? So do you like blank or blank? Are you blank or blank? Right? Very simple structure. Anybody can use it. Are beans boring or exciting? Right? Normally I like to ask people to answer this question in a focus group style thing, but I want to leave a little bit, I want to make sure we have enough time for the other thing, right? So you can ask people that question. Which pizza is better, right? Which do you like more, blank or blank? Do you like New York or Chicago style pizza, right? And sometimes people will surprise you because they'll break out of your framework. They'll say, I do not accept your framework, sir. I like Detroit style pizza, right? Or I like California Pizza Kitchen style pizza, original barbecue, right? So that's another like side benefit or power of doing it this way is that you create the framework and people break out of your framework and they surprise you. And that's what you're looking for in your research. Something that stands out, something that surprises you or is unexpected, okay? Here's a question. Are you for or against taking a knee, right, at sporting events, right, to make a point? That's the underlying question underneath this ad. So the technique works really well, not just in research, but it works really well for the ad campaigns themselves. Nike knew what they were doing with this. They wanted to create a debate. The debate was already happening. Some people were pissed at Colin Kaepernick, and some people loved what he was doing. So Nike said, let's throw some fuel on the fire, right? So the technique is really good for questions in your research, but it's also effective for campaigns. M&M's said, we're going to flip the status quo. We're going to be supporting women. They had a whole big multimedia campaign around flipping the status quo for women. And then Planters did a really great campaign around all or one when it comes to mixed nuts. Unfortunately, we won't have time to watch that ad, but you guys can look it up on the internet, okay? So I know we're at 9:45, so I'm gonna jump to the very end, okay? Just to tell you guys a couple quick things, okay? The third technique is reframing questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time for that, but it's in the book. Lots of great examples. I'm just gonna blow through these slides and say, look, there's more techniques for building insights that will help you with your briefs, with your campaigns, maybe even with innovative business ideas that can make you a millionaire. I hope you'll give me 1% royalty on whatever you make, all right? But a lot of people have said good things about this book as well, from Indeed to various agencies and whatnot. Like I said, you can buy it for 10 bucks. It might even be on sale right now for 9 bucks on Kindle. That's the only way I read books now is on Kindle, because I can highlight with my finger and I can write little notes whenever I'm thinking about stuff, right? But if If free is the speed that you work at, you can listen to the podcast. If you're like, sorry, Chris, I only work with things that are free. And so you can listen to the podcast. Like I said, just recently interviewed the VP of Creative at Liquid Death. We have a lot of wonderful guests on the show. They tell us how they connect the dots. It's a lot of fun. And then there's the Lightbulb newsletter, which you can get by going to chriskocek.com, my website. But I do hope you guys will stay in touch on LinkedIn, okay? I'm always looking for smart, hungry, talented interns, okay? So if you want to continue the conversation, again, we've got a lot of interns at Gallant. Well, not a lot, but we've got some interns at Gallant, and they do great work, and they often it's a springboard for them to get into big agencies or with other brands. So if you're interested, send me a note on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, say, hey, I was in Tom's class. I'd love to talk to you about the internship. And, then we just got some time for Q&A, but we don't have time for Q&A. Maybe one question, two questions. If you guys want to stick around, it's totally up to you.
Well, I want to say in closing, that was absolutely fantastic, Chris. I'm sorry we ran out of time. I wish we could have kept on rolling because this is vital. This is valuable. They need to understand this very important truth. It'll save them a lot of trouble and make them much more successful in the future. That newsletter, sign up for it. I endorse it wholly. By the way, Ryan and Gwen, I owe you books. So email me your best Amazon email address and you will get the Kindle versions. It is under $10. So buy it, everybody. And again, this was awesome. Chris, thank you so much for everything you did today. All that wisdom that you shared, it was outstanding. And as we check out of here, let's stop sharing. If you stop sharing,
Sure.
I want to get a picture of everybody as we roll out of here. All right. We do the old thumbs up thing. Hold on. Let me do this here. I'm going to put the view into gallery there. Okay, here we go. We give the thumbs up as we leave out of here. Thank you, all my students. You hung in here longer than our time. Give the thumbs up and say thanks as you get out of here. And we appreciate everything that we just experienced today. Take care. Thanks. All right, thumbs up. Say thanks as you check out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come on, everybody. All right, let me take it. There we go. There we go. Okay, we got the pictures. Beautiful. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Thank you. That was a great birthday present, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time, Tom. I love your energy. I appreciate you bringing me in. And
it was awesome. It was awesome, brother. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
All right. Happy birthday.
Bye.
All right, happy birthday. Take care. Bye-bye.